Anyway, a lot of times when people talk about dehydration, they say, well, I've got one of those. I got it for Christmas. It's, I was going to do banana chips. And then I discovered that there were never any in there because the kids ate them faster than I could make them. And then they kind of put it away and it sits there. And so a lot of people actually start out with a small snack dehydrator, or they go into one of the Harvest Made dehydrators that has, a little bigger tray to it. And these are really nice. I have one of these, and I have one of the big ones from Cabela's that holds like 26 trays. This one came with 4 trays, and you could buy more trays and more trays and more trays. Then you borrowed trays from your friend, and the next thing you know, you've got on your garage chair thing 32 trays, and it works. And so it doesn't make any difference what size you start with, how far you go with it. It's what works for you. And the biggest thing to remember if you're going out to buy a dehydrator is to decide how you're going to use it. Are you going to use it for snacks? Are you going to use it for your garden? Are you going to use it for all of the family that keeps coming over and saying, hey, do you have a bag of corn? Uh, Decide how you're going to use it and then buy accordingly. Uh, that's why I have 32 trays and a big Cabela's one that looks like a small refrigerator, but it's got lights in it. You can see what you're doing. Uh, how many of you have dehydrators already? Okay, so everybody's got one practically. Uh, so again, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what size. What's really important is to be able to control the temperature and to have a fan. And some of them don't have fans. And that means that your stuff takes longer to dry, you're using more energy in the end, and it's frustrating because you never quite, every batch is a little bit different no matter what. And so it's just a little harder to come out with a good product. Most of those that don't have fans are small ones anyway, so it's not that horrible. But it's just more convenient if you do have one better product. I'm going to take my glasses off because I can't read with them on, and I have to keep myself on track or I just wander all over the place. Uh, okay, so reason for dehydrating is the storage capacity you have for your produce. Canning jars take up room, freezers fill up fast, pies take up a lot of room. If you dehydrate your apples, you can have apple pie in January, and they taste pretty darn good. So storage, just the fact that you have everything is smaller for storage. This is a gallon and a half, maybe 2 gallons of green beans, fresh. So it makes a lot of difference. Dehydrated foods are portable if you do any backpacking. If you have kids that backpack or grandkids, they're very portable. There are a lot of things you can do that way. Shelf life is very, very long. If you keep your dehydrated produce in the dark and fairly cool, you're good for a very, very long time. This particular bag of sweet corn is 5 years old. Vacuum packed, still good. Very, very little change in flavor. So that part of it is excellent. Your shelf life is good. I only dehydrate corn every 3 or 4 years. I don't do it every year, so I don't have to get out there. Oh, I got to dehydrate corn this week or freeze it or whatever. And you can just set your garden schedule according to what you have the time for and what you want. And that brings me to a total digression, how to plant your garden for dehydrating. So again, you need to decide how often you want to do this, what you want to do, and what you're going to use it for. If you're going to, like me, sweet corn is something that my family is really big on. And if I don't have frozen sweet corn for every holiday dinner, I might as well just go to McDonald's by myself. So, so you need to plan your garden. And this year we have out about 250 or 300 onion plants. And so I have onions coming out of my ears. And this is my year to dehydrate onions. I will freeze some, but most of them will be used fresh or dehydrated for use over the next few years. Your equipment, you can use a machine. Some people have used success. Yes, ma'am. Pardon? Absolutely. Anytime you come up with something, the thing is, if you're thinking of something, three other people are too, but they're afraid to ask.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
If I dehydrate onions, or if you do that, does your house get all strong with onion fumes, like when you're chopping them?
Yes. I I dehydrate onions anytime I get a chance. And so when I'm making onion rings for Grandma, can you make onion rings this weekend? Sure. So then I take my big onions and I slice them for onion rings. The centers, the hard centers, the outside pieces that aren't as choice, those all go into the dehydrator. And so I use the nice ones for rings, the rest of it goes into the dehydrator. And so I may have only one tray in my dehydrator and it's full of onions. That's just fine. You use what you've got when you've got it. And sometimes I've even frozen a bunch and then chopped them and dehydrated them later. So I don't I don't throw anything away except for beets. I have never found a really good use for beets other than feeding the chickens. I don't like beets. My daughter-in-law uses beet powder for her veggie smoothie that she makes every day. And she had me dehydrate a few for her, but she said it's so expensive to buy. But she said one slice takes her through 4 days. She powders it and just uses like a teaspoon in each of. Some people can do beets. I don't. Yes, sir.
Do you generally use chop the same consistency, or do you chop different in different ways for different uses?
Yes and no. Uh, Perfectly clear. uh, when you're doing vegetables, most of your instructions will tell you an eighth to a quarter of an inch thick, depending on what they are. And I have a mandolin that I finally have found use for, and I will do my Roma tomatoes in quarter-inch slices and just throw a whole dehydrator, 26 trays full of wet tomatoes. And yet when I do onions, and those I will also do in quarter-inch slices, but by accident, total by accident, I did them in 16th-inch slices. And you can play with these later if you want. They're crispy, they're thin, and found out they're great for topping a salad with. So if you like onions in your salad, but you like them a little sweeter because the sugars concentrate when you dehydrate, just do a bunch of thin ones. And I was saying, how cute would that be if you had company and you were actually affording steaks and serving them? To throw a pat of butter on top and a little nest of dried crunchy onions on top of that. Cute. Not useful for me, but cute. So sometimes you run into something like that. But yes, and as far as sizes are concerned, some vegetables you can cube or slice. Uh, some fruits, of course, you might want to even mash up and make a leather out of them, which I don't do. But but the size really matters when you're drying. You have to watch them. I prefer slices for the most part when I can use them because they're easier for me to make sure everything is perfectly dry. And that is rule number one in drying. Dry, dry, dry. My stuff is, your stuff will be crispier and harder than the dried stuff you find in the store because they add preservatives to it. If you do it on your own, it's going to be, you're going to crack it. A lot of times it'll say, well, you can bend it. I find if that happens that I've maybe not dried enough and I may lose something. Don't want that to happen. Yes.
The extent that you dry it, does it depend on if, let's say you're going to maybe shrink wrap it, put it in the freezer, or keep it in the cupboard?
Right.
Do you dry to a different consistency, or do you always take it to the
I
same?
I yeah, I take my stuff to the end. I want it dry and crunchy. And then it can either be vacuum packed or put it in Ziplocs and package it. We'll talk about that too.
I was gonna say you'll probably get around to it, but like the difference between doing an onion versus maybe zucchini or a tomato, do you do a different temperature
No.
or the time? Okay,
Most vegetables dry are recommended to be dried between 130 to 135. I picked a higher one because I tend to open the door once in a while because I can't stand it and I have to play with them. So I usually 135 is usually my preference. You can go as low as 130. It takes longer. Uh, I never figured out how much longer, but it does take a little longer. Uh, as far as, I mean, there's other things that dry at different temperatures. Meats, you want to dry at 145. So, because 135 isn't enough to kill the bacteria and stuff in a meat. But that's, again, we'll go to that in a bit. So your equipment is important to have good working equipment, obviously, with anything. The other stuff you need is just normal things: bowls, colanders, dish towels, strainers. And then I came upon a wonderful idea. I used an old broken just strainer that I washed tomatoes and stuff in that had a broken foot. It was, I think, 50 some years old. And I'm sitting there dipping when I blanch my vegetables and then put them in the cold water. Then I'm dipping them out with this spider and thinking, well, this is working. Okay. What am I doing? I grabbed the colander and I dipped it into my big bowl and I come up, oh, well, in 3 of these I can be done, a lot quicker. So you sometimes have these really bright ideas that actually work out. Storage is pretty simple. Ziplocs in something dark, keep them cool. You don't want light. Light will turn them dark. It won't affect the way it tastes, but it will turn things dark. Tomatoes get almost black if you let them, but they still taste like tomatoes. They just don't look appealing. So keep them dark and as cool as you can. You can store them. Ziplocs are wonderful. I use a lot of the vacuum packaging for things that's going to be in there for quite a while. Green beans, any of it, any of it. I like the vacuum packaging. That stuff almost lasts for forever. Like I say, that corn is 5 years old, and when I take it out, it's going to be just as sweet as when I put it in. So I love dehydrating. uh, okay, then your tray liners. Sometimes when you have a nice big tray like rack like this, Obviously, things will fall through it when they get tiny. So for my green beans, I just put a screen on, which I didn't wash because I'm going to be handling it anyway, and maybe other people. Uh, put a screen over it, and then you don't lose your little pieces. If you don't have screens for your trays, parchment paper. You can use parchment paper for even for leathers. If you don't have a leather, a solid tray for using leathers. So this one has also a small screen that fits over a bigger tray, which I didn't bring because I was too lazy. But uh, also at the bottom of your dehydrator, if you're afraid that you've got stuff on your bigger tray that might fall through, you can put parchment paper on the bottom of your dehydrator. That helps to keep it clean. And goodness knows I need to do that. Helpful things are blenders, food processors, immersion blenders, whatever you've got around. Use it. You'll find that they don't just sit on the counter anymore. If you have eventually dried produce that you want to powder, like my daughter-in-law did with the beets, like I do with garlic, or sometimes onions, I have just a separate cheap little coffee bean grinder that I use for that. And strictly that. You don't want to put coffee beans through your garlic grinder. I don't care how well you've washed it. Don't do it. Let's see. The mandolin was great. I've got arthritis in my hands, and it really saves my hands and my wrists. So I use the mandolin for slicing things, everything from zucchini and cucumbers and what have you. By the way, cucumber, vegetable dip things, everybody will take one and dip it and say, yeah, that's pretty good. And then they go on to something else. So I found that cucumbers aren't a big thing at my house dried. So I just do refrigerator pickles and throw the rest to the chickens. My chickens eat well, by the way. Let's see what you can dehydrate. Anything you can eat. There are short cooked vegetables and long cooked vegetables. Anything that you would eat raw, like a green pepper, onions on your hamburger, anything that you would eat raw like that, you can just slice and throw in the dehydrator. You don't have to do anything to it, which is really nice. Zucchini, cabbage, green beans, all are just slice them, put them in. Green beans, it's recommended. And if you've got a dehydrator, you'll have a book that comes with it and it gives you some guidelines. Green beans, I usually want them in, like you see them in a can, 1-inch chunks. And that works out really well. And so then the short cooked vegetables or eating raw vegetables just go right straight in. The ones that take a little longer are the green beans, the corn. They need to be blanched for 2 minutes. And that's pretty much a rule. The only exception to that is potatoes. Potatoes need to go in for 3 minutes. And your slices you're going to want to be at least 1/8 of an inch thick. If they're smaller than that, if they're thinner than that, when you put them into the boiling water, they tend to break up. And let's face it, if you put a sliced potato that's, 1/8 of an inch thick into boiling water for 3 minutes, it's pretty much done. So, so anytime you have leftover baked potatoes, fried potatoes, anything you do with potatoes, if they're just throw them in the dehydrator. Yes, you can dehydrate fried potatoes, but you have to blot the oil off first. So it's kind of a pain in the butt. Excuse me. So that's as far as blanching and cooking, to put them into your cold water after you blanch them. And if you I set my stove timer for 2 minutes. If you set that for 2 minutes and it goes over while you're pulling the others out of the cold water, not gonna, overcooking is better than under. So it's not gonna hurt anything at all. If it 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, you know, you're not gonna ruin anything. You'll be just fine. Uh, Meats, I do not do. I have no use for dehydrated meats anymore. My husband hunts out the back door practically, and if he wants something to eat, he can darn well walk to the house. So I don't do meats for hunting trips or anything like that anymore. Don't have kids at home that need snacks after school, don't do meats. Meats should be done fully cooked at 145 degrees. And then when I tell you about my little book there are tons of recipes in there for different types of meats that you can dry, jerkies that you can make, and some of them are actually good enough to break up and use as a stew or put them into soups. I just don't do them. Pasta. Anybody make homemade pasta? Try it. Eggs, flour, pinch salt if you want that. And that's pretty much it. And so you can, after you've cut your noodles, just simply make little nests on top of your screen or parchment paper or your leather trays. It doesn't really matter as long as it's not the big one. And just put your little nests of noodles all over the place and dry them. When they crack, they're done. When they're completely dry, they're done. And then you can package those and rehydrate those as you need. Just throw them in boiling water like you would normally do. Doesn't take very long. It doesn't take them as long to cook as the packaged stuff does. Let's see. Got fruits I don't do a lot of anymore. Yes, sir. Spicy peppers, depends on how you're eating them. No, my hot peppers, I simply take the top off, cut them in half, throw them on the dryer on these because I want the seeds too. I leave the seeds in because I like spice. And if you don't like spice, take your seeds out, but just dry the halves. But no, I leave the seeds in. And then again, I can either put them through my food chopper thing and get small flakes, like you buy the flaked peppers in the store. And then I just put those as I need them and put them into Ziploc and keep them in the pantry. Yes. Yes, ma'am?
So I recently tried to dehydrate peppers, and I'm curious about how to know.
I can't hear very well.
Oh. I recently tried to dehydrate peppers, and they come out really small, and I didn't know if that was not right. Like when I can see that with your stuff that it does shrink down, and I even tried to rehydrate them. I'm curious about how to know amounts if you're using things in a recipe once you've rehydrated something or putting it into something.
Right, how to figure out how much you need rehydrated. Yeah, that's right there. I'll be there in just a minute. Okay, so fruits, you can make leathers out of them. If you have berries with hard waxy coverings like blueberries or cherries or something like that, I don't do any of those, but they have to be checked, which means you have to put them into boiling water until the skins start to crack, because you have to have a way for the moisture to get out. And I do not mess with those at all. I really have no use for them. So those you'll have to experiment with until you get a method down. And this is really important. Keep a journal. Record what you did, what day you did it, and how you did it. And then you will eventually figure out oh, you won't have to look at it anymore. I already did that. This is how I do it, and it just comes as habit. But if you don't keep good records, and if you don't mark your packages with a permanent marker when you put them somewhere, all of a sudden you will come up with a package of something that looks strangely like apples, but doesn't really look like apples. Oh, it's only been there 12 years at the bottom of the pile, and maybe the chickens would like those too. So keeping good records is really important. Another thing that you can do that you might not find any use for right at the moment is you can dry cooked grains for almost instant rehydration to use in soups or casseroles, or to give as gifts in little containers for Christmas or whatever, because you don't have to wait for them to cook. So if you've got barley already cooked and you put a couple tablespoons in your little jar of veggies that you're giving to somebody with fancy top on it for Christmas as a soup pot, all they have to do is add the broth. Basically, heat it up for 5 minutes and they're done because everything's cooked. So there's lots of different ways that you can use this stuff. And I never really thought about dehydrating cooked grains until my mother got to be 94. And then I would take the little jelly jars and I'd put a little bit of everything in, and she'd just heat up a pan of broth and dump them in, and in 10 minutes she had soup. So yes, sir.
You ever soak, dehydrate your products before you use them?
Oh, yes.
Like you're
Yeah.
gonna have corn the next day. You just stick them in water.
Yeah.
And
that's right there.
never mind.
I'll be right there. I'll get there quickly, because I'm sure everybody has other things to do. So recording and marking stuff is really important. So the temperature. So keep track of the temperature that you cooked, that you dehydrated at, how long it took, how many trays you had in there. Kind of see if you can judge, was this really a wet bunch, like a bunch of tomatoes, or was it onions that you put in just natural? And you get an idea. So you think, well, is this going to take 36 hours or is it going to take 3? So it kind of depends. You have to keep records. Then rehydrating. It's very simple and it's varied. One method is to take your vegetables, cover them with cool water, and just let them sit overnight. That's one way. So that's kind of a 1-to-1 ratio if you do that. You'll find some veggies will take a little more water, some a little less, but you can always drain that water off, use that for soup. Then the next one is hot liquid. You can rehydrate in boiling water. You can cover them with boiling water and just let them sit until they're ready. Again, depends on how dry you had them to start with and what you're going to do with them. If you're going to put them into soup, you don't have to rehydrate anything. You just drop them in by the handful. Well, not the handful. That'd be too much. You can also use hot milk, but that as soon as it cools, has to be refrigerated until they're dehydrated, or rehydrated. Beef broth, chicken broth, bone broth, veggie broth, anything like that is fine for rehydrating. We were talking about apple slices before we started, and apple slices are not just a snack. They are apple pies in January, or apple crisp. And the best way I found for me to rehydrate that is the cheapest apple juice I can find. So in the fall, when it's all on sale and whatever, I will buy maybe 3 gallons of cheap apple juice, and I will use that over the winter to rehydrate my apples for desserts. or just to have if you like apples with with pork chops, to throw some apple slices in with your pork chops toward the end. You've got them rehydrated, ready to go. You can also steam them for 3 minutes. That will also rehydrate the majority of your vegetables nicely, and then you can use them because they haven't been soaked in a liquid. You can use them as you would pretty much a fresh vegetable. So steaming is good. Dehydrated vegetables can be used for backpacking. You can prepackage meals for college kids. They can do a lot of stuff in the microwave. They're much more technology oriented than we are, so they probably actually know how to use one. You can use them for like I said, for gifts at Christmas time. If you've got older people that are not liking to cook for themselves or whatever, you can put potatoes. You can put stew in a pint jar, enough for several people. So your potato slices can go in there, some green beans, a little corn, maybe some jerky of some kind, and have it all in one jar. Using them for casseroles, and you can just use whatever you want. And I want you guys to come up and look at this afterwards and open it up, play with it, feel it, do whatever you want with it. My chickens are getting it. So, except for this one. So, and I forgot, I apologize, I forgot to bring my bag of potatoes. I had it sitting out on the counter. I just did it before I left for the weekend, and I left my potato slices on the counter. Those of you who are creative can dry flowers. You can dry herbs, lots and lots of herbs. I have a really good book here that I picked up at the University of Minnesota, and it's called A Guide to Fresh Herbs: When to Snip, What to Crush, How to Enjoy. It has got so much valuable information in here. And it turns out, you can dehydrate all of your herbs if you'd like, but the recommended way is still the old-fashioned upside down in a paper bag, poke it full of holes, hang it in your garage till they're dry. The paper bag keeps the bugs off of it, the holes will allow air to circulate, and the oils from the stems will come into the leaves, and your herbs are more flavorful. You can pick those leaves off and dry them like I do, because I don't want stuff, unless it's garlic, I don't want it hanging all over my garage. And I put mine on either the fine tray or the leather tray, and I just dry the leaves. It takes a pinch more of the herb than if you did it really the nice way, but I don't care. I got lots of it. I can use a little more. And then let's see. I think probably I would like to have you check this stuff out, but there's a book over here called The Dehydrator's Bible. It has just about everything you would ever want to know except cabbage. I had to find that someplace else. And it's got tons. The front, 40 pages is on dehydration. The rest of it is recipes on how to use what you've got. Everything from desserts, main meals, snacks, whatever. And it even talks about dehydrating dairy, which I've never done, and I don't think I ever will. Yogurt and stuff like that to dry, if you can buy it cheap or make your own, to dehydrate that on the leather sheet, and then break it up and use it, for snacks and stuff. I never found that useful. So, are there any? Yes, ma'am. I do not have one. My son keeps telling me I should get one, and I don't have one. But I mean, I use them in the crock pot all the time, so I don't know what an Instapot actually even is because I don't get that kind of. That sounds like fun. It sounds like fun. But well, then that would be one of the first things I would do would be to start playing with that. If you use it a lot, then by all means give it a try. It can't hurt anything. You're going to have rehydrated vegetables no matter how you look at it. Yes, that is something I will never dehydrate again, and that's because I had a very bad experience with it. I cubed my carrots in quarter-inch cubes. Everything was beautiful. I had them all done. I packaged them all up, and when I threw a handful in soup, they lost all of their color and looked like little gelatin things in there. Oh, I don't think so. I mean, they still tasted like carrots, but they weren't pretty. So I don't know what I did wrong, but they looked really great in the package. But I just didn't. So, and I know a lot of people do. So I don't know what I did that was, maybe I just cooked the color out of them in the soup, and I shouldn't have done that much. Should have thrown them in toward the end rather than the beginning.
Have
So
you done rutabagas or turnips?
I have not done those because my husband won't eat them, so I don't grow them. But again, this book has got just about everything in there. And if anyway, something I don't have with me is because I don't have any done yet is butternut squash. I do butternut squash in about quarter-inch big slices, and then I powder them when I get ready to use them. I powder them in my food processor, put in hot water, just let them add enough hot water, boiling water as I need to get everything to the consistency that I want. So I can use it as a mashed vegetable for casserole, little marshmallows and brown sugar on top. And so the butternut squash I really like. I've dehydrated summer squash, zucchini. I don't have all of that with me right now because I haven't been home to do a lot of it yet. But in anything that you can, and I would assume that if you, I have not tried this with my potatoes, but I don't see any reason why you can't rehydrate the potatoes, put them through your food processor, and get them to the point of where they're close to coarse mashed potatoes. So it kind of, you have to play with this stuff, just like everything else. The cabbage, I had not done cabbage before, but my mother does a creamed cabbage, or did. She passed away in the winter at 98, still shoveling her own deck. Uh, so I took I had a half a small head of cabbage the other day, and I dehydrated that, and I thought I'm going to try that with the cream sauce that she uses, and just simply use half and half rather than heavy cream, and let it soak up some of that. Put it in warm, stick it in the refrigerator, let it sit overnight, and then add all the butter and stuff I want to it the next day. But that's what I'm going to try with that. Um, so I guess I would invite you to come up and take a look at whatever you want to see. Yes, sir.
Like your fruit leathers and some of your things, do you sweeten or season anything? Nothing.
No, no seasoning. Uh, you don't. That interrupts anything that you coat anything with is going to interrupt the. Now you can find some recipes for leathers that may incorporate sweetener, but I have not found one yet. Most of them just the right fruit should be sweet enough by itself. There really shouldn't be a reason. Yes, ma'am.
similar experiences that people have tried.
Oh, me
that
too.
are bad.
I love.
'Cause I don't want to do them.
I love ideas. I love ideas. Give me your ideas on what you do, what you like. Yes, ma'am.
I did try some. I tried a couple of different things. So I tried rhubarb for the first time.
Okay.
I had 5 trays of rhubarb on the like the harvest one,
Right.
like you
On
did
the Harvest
there.
Made. Yeah.
Yep. And when I got done, I put them in 1 quart and I vacuum sealed it.
Mm-hmm.
So that was fun. I don't know if I'll ever use them, but it was fun to try.
Yes. Yes.
And I also did dillweed for the first time.
Okay.
And because my dill was really outdated, and
Yep.
I was like, oh my gosh, that was so fun to do the dillweed.
Yes.
Because now I have a whole jar fresh, and it would have cost me $7 or $8 to buy it.
Minimum.
Yeah.
Minimum.
So, and the other thing that's really fun if you have grandkids, do mini marshmallows.
Oh yes. Well, see, that's
They're
if
hoots.
yes, and then if you go backpacking, you just take the packages of cocoa, and your little bag of marshmallows that will feed 25 people, and sprinkle a few on top when you pour in your hot boiling water, and it's yes. That could be really fun. Yes, sir.
Sorry, did I cut you off? I was just, I don't know if you said much about planning your garden around it, or timing, or amounts, or anything, but can you speak about your garden as associated with that, or anything?
Sure. This year, my husband always plants a lot of onions, and I use a lot of onions and give a lot of them to my kids. And so we put in like 250, 300 onion plants. And this is also a tomato year. So last year I had 2 tomato plants, enough to eat fresh, period. The rest I had either frozen or dehydrated. And so, because a lot of times I'll freeze tomatoes when they're all coming at the same time. I'll stuff everything in the freezer, and then I will make tomato sauce later. I'll just unthaw them and put everything through the blender and cook it down and make tomato sauce and can it. But as far as, now I'm off track. Yeah, planning your garden for it. That's what I do. Last year we had 2 tomato plants. This year we have 47. Okay? So this year we'll be drying. I will not have to dehydrate tomatoes for at least 3 years. I will not have to dehydrate onions for at least 3 years. We have 250 or 300 potato plants. I will probably not have to dehydrate potatoes as long as I live again. I am 78. Time is ticking here.
Does it change the drying a lot? And like if you freeze and hydrate, like let's say an onion, sliced onion versus fresh onion, change your process
as rehydrating, let's face it, I tend to use onions in things, and whether it's meatloaf or casseroles or soups or stews, and so I tend to use the slices and just throw them in wherever, or if I'm going to do scalloped potatoes or something, I may just chop them in quarters or something. But the small pieces and the ends and stuff that I tend to freeze, I will either take those out later, and when I've got time, and maybe dehydrate some of those and then powder them and package that as powder. So you really have a big variety of ways to be able to use it or to preserve it. And the big thing is to make sure you can use it all eventually. I'll eventually use the potato. But yes, as far as planning the garden, yes, I plan my garden around what I'm going to preserve that year. I don't just go out and plant a bunch of stuff every year. My husband plants beets every year. My chickens eat beets like crazy. I don't like beets. I fix them beets once every week or so just to be nice. And but are they gorgeous dehydrated? They keep their color. beautiful, they're nice, and I just don't like beets, so I can't tell you how to use them. And I've never found any place online or anywhere else that can tell you how to use beets, either fresh or dehydrated. I have not. We eat it too fast. I have not, but I understand it does dehydrate well. I don't know about rehydrating. It's a pretty fragile vegetable, so I would be somewhat concerned that it might fall apart once it was rehydrated. But I don't know. I have not played with it. And that's what you have to do. You have to experiment, go out and play with stuff, try something, and just don't put garlic in with your fruit leather. But you can put a shelf of garlic in. You can put zucchini. You can put tomatoes. You can mix your trays in your dehydrator. You don't have to have just one thing. And sometimes if I'm making something fresh that I want to dehydrate eventually, I'll make a double batch of whatever and then put it in the dehydrator, whatever's left over. And whether you do your pasta or, if you were making pasta for supper and you were making fresh, make a triple batch. Take the rest of it after supper, chop it up, put it in the dehydrator. I mean, you just have to play with this stuff. You have to experiment with it. And any ideas that you've got for stuff that I haven't done, I'd love to hear it. It's just learning is fun. Yes, sir.
Just saw a food demo on a Vitamix
Mm-hmm.
blender.
Don't have one.
I know, but he was making like an ice cream or throwing ice and chocolate
Uh-huh.
and I think an almond milk.
Right.
But he was putting kale and and you can like your beets you could probably powder and put in a smoothie.
Yeah, my daughter-in-law does
anything,
that.
but I'm
Yeah,
just
that's how she used her beets.
you can incorporate just about anything into
Yes. Healthy.
even a healthy
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. I'm not into healthy.
Or baking, yeah. Cookies.
I'm into butter. If you can use, my veterinarian and I were doing a training endurance ride one day, and we were getting a little bit bored, and we started talking about food and how bananas are supposed to be the perfect food. They aren't. It's Alfredo sauce. Anytime you can put butter, garlic, and cream in one spot and use it on anything, it's perfect. So come up, and if you have more questions, I'm here. Open the packages, look at stuff, feel it, how it feels dehydrated. Help yourself. Oh, sure.
So when you're doing tomatoes, do you just use the Roma type, or do you use big beef and
I
Brandywine
use anything I got my hands on.
Okay.
This year I just planted Romas. I planted one slicer, and the rest of them are all Romas because in addition to dehydrating, this is also a tomato year, so I'm going to can lots of tomato sauce and tomato paste.
I only use Romas for canning and salsa because they're so much meatier.
They're so nice. They're so nice, and they dry up so beautifully. And I would suspect, in fact, I'm probably going to try that this weekend. I'm going to try to see how they are on a salad rehydrated in slices, and see how that turns out. And I don't peel them or anything. I just tomatoes just go in just like they are, whether I'm canning or anything. They go through the blender and everything gets put together, and I cook it down. I'm not that fussy.
I'm curious about your organization, so that, when you're saying you're doing something for the next few years, how do you organize that you can find what you put away?
If you've got a family of kids, I used to plant a big garden every year because I was always running out of something. But now that it's just the two of us, and for the past 30 years, it's been small or just the two of us. So I have had to reorganize. Why should I spend I can dehydrate stuff so much faster than I can can it. And when I take my tomatoes out and put them through my blender and get them powdered and pour in enough hot water to make a tomato paste, why should I spend my time canning? You know, it just there's some things that I just do because it's easier, it's more economical, and as far as planning my garden, I what do we use? Do we use summer squash? Yeah, few soups, so one hill of summer squash. So I try to limit him. He gets way too enthusiastic. As far as storage is concerned, uh, I use a lot of Ziplocs, but then I will take this Ziploc after it's full and I will put it into a coffee can with a lid, or some of it I will do with the vacuum sealer. It depends on how long I think it's gonna last. The cabbage, I can't really wait to try the cabbage. But as far as tomatoes, if you don't keep them dark, they will turn dark on you. Like I said, it won't affect the flavor or the nutritional value, but they will turn dark. The color will change. So just try and keep them. I keep everything in my root cellar on shelves and stuff in ice cream buckets, and I'll have an ice cream bucket that says corn on the top, and label everything, date it, label it. It's really important. But you can use anything that you've got for storage, whether it's plastic bags or, and I've got some garlic that I just threw straight into an ice cream bucket. I had a whole ice cream bucket full of garlic slices, and they're gone. I have to plant garlic this year. I misjudged. I have no garlic this winter. So, yes, sir.
Mice ever get into your stash?
No, no. Nothing that I have is chewable. The ice cream buckets, coffee cans. Obviously, you want to rinse your coffee can really well with soda water or whatever, so to take the smell out. But even in a bag, you want your coffee can to be clean. Yes.
Deterrent for
Yes.
any of these, right?
Oxygen will turn colors, also will affect flavors. So whatever I've got in this snack bag, I will squeeze out as much air as I can first, and then just fold it over and pack them in. I just pack a whole coffee can full of little snack bags, and this is enough to put into a pot of soup. You have to play with it. You have to experiment and see how much you need. For the two of us, if I make an entire big kettle of soup, it's too much. So I'm down to half a kettle. Nope. Nope. No. But you can use whatever you want to. And you can go online, and I don't do handouts anymore because everything's on stupid computers. Although a lot of the information isn't all that good. It's I don't know. You just have to use common sense and be careful what you look at. Yes, sir.
Find having the dried stuff, it's easier to do a smaller batch. Like, let's say you were freezing whatever, a pint of this or half a pint of that, and trying to throw it together. You find this any easier to make yourself a small batch of soup for two, or
Oh, yes.
or limiting your quantities?
Yes, yes. Which is why I use a lot of these snack bags, because whereas I used to use the quart size, well, this is almost 2 gallons of green beans. I am not rehydrating this whole thing, let me tell you. But I might, for a green bean casserole, I might take probably a third of it and rehydrate that. But for two of us, if I'm doing soup, I got this. I can take a few of these, a few onions. I mean, I got a pot of soup. All I need is broth. Yes.
Try to rotate out your last
I try. That's
You-
why I try to date everything that
rotate it
as
out,
I make it.
use the old and
Yeah, and if I've got corn in an ice cream bucket, it not only says corn on top, it's got the date on top, and each of the bags inside has the date on it. So it just might be September 21 or something. Yes.
Make salsa.
I do. I love salsa. I make salsa by the ice cream bucket full, and then we go buy every bag of scoops that Marketplace has, and that's what we have for lunch for days.
So salsa after salsa after rehydrated, or
I
you
have
do it
not. I
fresh?
have not.
You do it
I
fresh?
have never had enough salsa that I could dehydrate it.
Not to dehydrate salsa, but to dehydrate
All
all the
the
ingredients.
absolutely, and you could put them all together if you plan it out and you figure I need. Okay, I've got these 2 trays in my dehydrator, and I'm going to put salsa ingredients on them, and they will make one batch of salsa. And I'll put my green peppers and my tomatoes and my onions and my hot peppers. Do it all at one time. You play with it. Have a good time with it. It's just fun, and you can come back here next year and you can run the class, and you can tell us how to do salsa. I've never had enough of anything left over. But scalloped potatoes, oh my, onions with dried potatoes, dried onions, dried potatoes, pour in some half and half, chunk of butter, sprinkle a little flour, salt and pepper in there, put a lid on it, walk away. Yes, ma'am.
I love the meal ideas like that. Are you willing to rattle off just a few that you do? When you said soup, scalloped potatoes, like different things, and we can look into that.
Yes, we do. I love to cook. I love to cook. I enjoy it, and so anytime I can put things together and all of a sudden come up with something that, wow, that worked, rather than, well, this is going to the chickens. My chickens, like I said, eat very well, but no, to figure out how you're going to use this stuff, it's really important. If you don't use it, it isn't worth doing. So, so take some time when you're dehydrating stuff, and go ahead this year, do whatever you can when you can, and then sit down over the winter and think, okay, we've got cabbage, we've got onions, got some zucchini and some tomatoes. What can I do with that? And just start putting some things together. I love summer squash with tomatoes and onions, just rehydrated together, stir fried in a little butter, salt and pepper. Call it your side vegetable. I mean, that's one of my favorite things to eat. It's like a old-fashioned succotash or something. You can throw green beans in there, anything you've got, and just it's good. You can put butter on it. It's good. The no, no. I actually I take I don't blanch the butternut squash or any of the other squashes, because my butternut squash is usually pretty thin, and I mean, I've got some a good big sharp knife that I can cut it, in quarters, and then get it some decent nice slices, thin slices out of it. So no, I do not. I mean, you could if you wanted to. Wouldn't hurt anything. Doesn't hurt anything. No, I don't either. Anytime I can keep steam out of the house makes me happy. So, yeah.
So, how do the rehydrated meals compare to like making from fresh? You said that they're more flavorful sometimes, right?
You don't lose the flavor. You don't lose the vitamins. So it's healthier than canned, because in canned you've got so much high heat and pressure involved that you do destroy some of the stuff. it's anything you do yourself is better than what you get in the store, and it's healthier for you no matter what. So I had some of the stuff I have not tried. I have not tried the green beans as a side dish because I haven't needed to. You know, the day didn't come up where I don't have something already planned, and that gets to be a problem. Sometimes you need to plan to use some of this stuff. Otherwise, it's really tempting to buy, 10-pound bag of potatoes when you've got about 50 pounds dehydrated in your root cellar. I mean, you have to use some common sense and plan around this stuff. And say, okay, twice a week, at least twice a week, I'm using my dehydrated vegetables. And all of a sudden, you'll find you're using them a lot more than that. Yes, sir. I have not done much with anything that is a liquid that has to go on the sheets because why would I do that when I can take my dried tomatoes, put them in my blender, powder them, pretty close to powdered, put them in a pot, add some water, start cooking it, add my spices, I have spaghetti sauce. So why would I make spaghetti sauce? Oh, I thought you said spaghetti sauce. Well, this must be my bad ear. I am 78. Spaghetti squash. I have not tried that because we grew it one year and ended up giving it all to the neighbor because I don't like squash very well. And my husband's wonderful idea of spaghetti squash that would be really helpful went to the neighbors. Didn't use a one of them.
And then
Oh,
hydrate it, or would you know?
now I forget how do they eat? Can you just like tear them apart when they're raw? If you can tear them apart and shred it after, well, then I would you can anything that's cooked you can dehydrate, and it shouldn't. So I would start with one and see how that works, and rehydrate it immediately and use it within a couple of weeks so that you know, is this something I want to do, or even a few days. You have to play with it and use what you can. You guys need to come up and look at this stuff and see.
We have
I say open the bags, play with whatever's in it.